positioning that actually led them to a significant event. The significance was, in the series that I was talking about, Take Me to the King, is that people missed the sign of what they said they were looking for. They had been waiting for centuries and years for the coming of this Christ child, this one who would come to save his people from their sin. They had been looking, but they missed him. And the significance of shepherds who were able to discern his presence, tending their flocks by night, and wise men who travel, far. And again, some people want to make them Oriental and said they're from the East. No, they traveled east, which means they were African, Edenic nomads that wandered from, again, East Africa, coming in this particular region as they are looking now at this baby who at one point had to be hidden back in Africa. You do know that when he got to a certain age and Herod's decrees was to kill all the babies, they had to hide him. And if you take a baby and hide him in Ethiopia or an African region or North Africa, then suggest that it probably is not going to be the kind of baby that you see on too many cards out there. Yeah. So the challenge that you have, though, is did you expect his presence and do you protect his birth? Do you expect that he is still wanting to be born amidst dark times? People who walked in darkness, Isaiah said, have seen a great light. And that light that shines is the light of hope. We are dealing with what I could still consider to be a pandemic times, because I don't think we will have post-pandemic. I think we are still in it. There's still some surges that are happening, and people who are catching it can testify to the fact that we're not out of the woods with it. So we've got to learn to make the adjustments.
That's right.
And learn to be wise and smart with it. But it should not stop you from the activity of what you ought be doing and what you ought at least be focused on. I mean, let's be honest, when you're doing everything else that you choose to want to do, why not come to church and celebrate that which we are wanting the world to know happened on that significant day? Why not make it a mental statement to go and be a part of a gathered group that would help them to emphasize that his birth is meaningful? You say, well, I don't have to go to church, to do that. I could just stay at home and do that. Well, people don't have to go to Lions game.
Make it plain.
As well do it. You can stay at home and watch it on television, but I guarantee you that stadium is going to be packed because there's something about being gathered with other Lions fans. I get it. Listen, I think I spoke them into a winning season. I called them the Trions when they were 1-7. So now they're 7-7. Now all of a sudden, everybody all get excited, jumping on the way. But the point is that when you see them starting to win, is just something about being present with the other person. But it's the same thing about the gathered body coming to church. It's the same thing. The shepherds could have celebrated them in the fields, but they came to where the Christ child was.
That's right.
And the heavenly host joined them there. Hallelujah. Same thing.
Yes.
The wise men could have stayed in the east.
Yes.
And, they didn't have Amazon back then or mail system to bring it, but they brought their gifts and brought them to the place of his birth.
Yes.
So you need to bring your presence and bring your presence right to the house and be with us on this Sunday and celebrate. Listen, if there was no other reason to celebrate it, when I saw those babies giving their speeches this past week, it lets me know the joy of Christmas. When I watched the dancers dance, young Jonathan Ambrose and the mimers and my son and those young men miming. Go back and watch Sunday service. It'll bless you. It gave me, again, the ability to know that it births hope among us. So I would add that word to what Reverend Carr has already stated about the importance of us returning to the house of God. Let us come back and join with us. Now, I know in various places in the country, the weather's going to be inclement, but it's going to be cold just about everywhere Sunday. But that won't stop, again, them from playing. I watched the game on last night. It was cold, and they handled it to Green Bay. And
out there with no shirts.
No shirts. Listen, out there the whole for 3-4 hours, banging on each other, hitting, knocking each other down, and all that kind of stuff. But listen, they got up and got right back on that field. And we're not having worship outside. We're going to be right on here where it's nice and warm. So come on to the house, come to the temple, and share with us on this Sunday. Well, on this closing date, my cohort wants to deal with this encountering Jesus motif. And again, this is something that we have been approaching as a study guide. And we're going to start the year out with it again. If you're interested in wanting to join in with us through the question and answers of this particular book, we're going to be doing it live in 2023, where you can have the ability to answer the questions, and we can have group discussion, and we'll even have an opportunity for some of you who want to participate via Zoom link, where you can maybe do that in a chat area as well with us, so that we can get the full benefit of this study material. It's a life-changing look at the Son of God as we look at the Christ child. That is great work that has been put together. And we're in week number 3, I believe, of this series, and we just wanted to get it started before we come back in January and complete it. And today's lesson, we want to see Jesus as a man of mission and compassion.
Yes.
And Reverend Carr chose this particular passage, and ironically, I was discussing this passage just not long ago with a dear friend, and then you chose this. I said, how about that for confirmation? This is a wonderful text, and I want to look at not just the latter part of the chapter, but we're going to take a quick walk through all of it since we're in exposition format. So go to Mark chapter 5 with us, and tonight we're going to share with you a word that would help you understand a look at Jesus. And in particular, I want to raise an issue that has been taboo in the church for us to talk about, and I think it's apropos during this time. And if we want to say that he is a man of compassion, then I think we ought to point to the fact that he's concerned about all the issues of this season and the ones that we deal with beyond this season that sometimes the church has ignored. Because sometimes we use Christmas to cover up some stuff that maybe it's a chance to unleash and unbirth, or unearth, if you would, so that we can see its implication. Because I want to look at this text and look at how Jesus even dares approach mental health. Because too often, even in the church, we do not deal with the issue of mental health, with a realistic lens.
Yes.
We label people and label things in ways that makes it seem like Jesus is not concerned about it.
Yes.
Or that we're not having to encounter it or deal with it in a very real way. So we have a way of misnaming things and labeling things and putting things in a nice little shelf so we can sanitize our church experience and sanitize our gospel and keep things in a way so that we don't have the capacity to have to confront and face and deal with critical issues that we're dealing with on a regular basis. So I want to look at this and face this season to deal with those people who, for the season, have a tough time because it opens up some areas that are still fresh and meaningful for them. And I want those of you who are out there who also may have family members or other persons who have been wrestling with or dealing with various areas of mental health challenges, tell them to tune in. Tell them to look at this lesson with us on tonight. Tag them in the text, type the name in, have them to come on, call them up, hit them on YouTube, like the page, share the page, whatever it is, because I want to look at this man of compassion that is yet born unto us. And he, in Isaiah's text that I recited earlier, it says that one of his attributes is he is a man of sorrows and acquainted with whatever grieves us. And I would say to us that one of the grieving issues of our day, issues that cause us much consternation, is the fact that we have not, particularly even at the church, dealt with the issue of mental health. We have a way of labeling people, various things. We've called folk crazy. We've called them different and a little off. We've called them this, that, and the other, without understanding the issues toward it. And it's always interesting to me, too, that even when you deal with issues that deal with the end work of criminal behavior, that some people can hide behind a mental health, excuse, fairly easy. But when it happens to be other groups of people, then it's just who they are. It's just their behavior, as if all people of that color or culture, are brain damaged or crazy, So you have to be careful how you throw terms and titles around, because there is legitimate issues of illness and health challenge, just like you deal with cancer, or just like you deal with diabetes, or heart disease, or anything else in the physical body. There are also maladies of the mental and the spiritual realm that needs also health, help, and attention.
Yes, indeed.
So let's look at how Jesus confronts it, and then maybe you'll see that it's not so bad to have a therapist if you need one. Let's see how Jesus confronts it, and maybe you'll understand that maybe what you used to label or people you used to not invite around for Christmas because you didn't want them to mess up the Christmas party, maybe you'll have a better or different look at how we approach these matters. The first thing I want to say is Mark chapter 5, Reverend Carr, is not the beginning of this scenario. Be careful how you read scripture text, because scripture text and chapter and verse was later assigned, but you don't want to sometimes forget that some stories are connected to other passages, so that you have to look, and that's what Bible study is about.
That's right.
You have to study the context, and sometimes that means looking at pretext, post-text, and digging under the text so that you get its full meaning and flesh it out. So, and when it says in the verse of 5 and 1, and they came over unto the other side of the sea, into the country of the Gadarenes, that is a clue that you need to possibly look ahead of this chapter to get the full context. So if it says and, most times in a particular area that's a conjunctive word, it's joining a thought with a thought.
Right.
And so if it says and they came to the other side, you have to go and look at when they purposed to go to the other side. So if you go to Mark chapter 4, verse 35, it says, and the same day when evening was come, Jesus saith unto them, let us pass over to the other side. There we go. So Jesus had intentionality. He says in Mark 4:35, let's go to the other side. And then Mark 5:1 it says, and they came to the other side. So Mark 4:35 joins us to that text. And one of the reasons why I think it's important for us to deal with that, because in this text, Mark 4:35, Jesus, as the Bible suggests, it was evening time. He was fatigued. He had been under pressure from the crowds and dealing with a long day, kind of like Reverend Carr says, my Tuesdays go, so, he's at that place where he wished he could have taken that Jesus nap, but he was so fatigued as he was that he went, without any preparation, and they sent away the multitude that took him, even as he was, it says in the ship, verse 36, and he was attempting to get away. And as he moved to get to the other side, they moved away the multitudes. He is now on board a ship. It's interesting, Mark's version says, and there were also with him other little ships. That always amazes me when I read that part, because if Jesus is on a vessel, I probably want to be on the one he's on.
That's right.
So, I'm always leery of ships that are close to Jesus but not on with Jesus. People who have, their own particular vessels, and they own their own fantastic voyage, but they're not sailing with the master. Just because you're on the same water don't mean you're on the same ship.
Oh, that's a good sermon series.
That is a good one right there. Just because you're in the same water don't mean you're on board the same ship, because what happens to some people in the storm may not be the resulting factor of other people. We'll see that. And it says there arose a great storm on the wind, a great storm of wind in the middle of that. And do know that storms, whenever you see them biblically, they never start out in a storm. Most times people start out, things are well. Whether Acts 27, when we looked at the Acts series, and they was in that Euroclydon, that north wind was blowing, everything was fine, and then south wind was blowing. Then all of a sudden, here come that tempestuous storm. And storms usually happen when you are too far out to get back, or you're not far enough where you're going to say, I'm there. So in the midst of your journey in life, that's when you usually encounter storms, whether it be a business storm, a marital storm, a job storm, a church storm, whatever storm you're going through. The devil knows how to catch you out in the middle of your passage, and that's when he wreaks havoc on you at his best. So Jesus is in this sea. They are on the way to the other side, but they haven't made it to the other side. They've left one side, on the way to the other side, and here comes a storm. Now, the storm that we deal with catches Jesus in this particular ship. And I'm just looking at the preamble of this as we prepare to go where we're going. And it says that they get concerned on the ship. They wake Jesus up and say to him, verse 38, do you not care that we are perishing in this storm? There have been some things that are happening in many people's lives. Right. And many of us get to that place where we are so storm-tossed or storm-driven that we say to the Master, Lord, do you care that I in this situation? Do you care that I feel like I'm not going to make it? Do you care that even though I know I'm with you and I believe you are with me, I mean, we on board the same ship, but it seems like that you are watching me literally perish while we're in the midst of a storm, and here you are sleeping. And sometimes you had that feeling like Jesus is asleep and I'm dying. He's not paying attention, and I'm going through this health crisis. I'm going through this job crisis, this financial crisis, this marital crisis. I'm going through this national crisis. I'm looking, and this January 6th committee that made this report for the 10th time, and you get this crazy man is still running around, unfettered and in jail. And you do know, had that been any other president, nonetheless, any other person, that by now they would have had them up under, just so again, there's sometimes it seems like that things are not happening fair. Things are not happening the way they, again, should. And this cry for his master, I'm glad they called him by, a reverent name. Master, that is master teacher, that is one who we are looking to for help and leadership. Do you care that I'm going through what I'm going through?
Yes.
And that is, I think, an appropriate cry for people who are dealing with challenge, and particularly as we will come to eventually in the next chapter deal with this issue of mental health. I want to say to you, you need to know that Jesus cares about what you're going through.
Yes.
To the point where he will even wake up from a rest to speak to your situation and to deal with what is happening with you. And I want to rest this point right now and ask Reverend Carr, what do you think about, this season and the storms that people are dealing with of various kinds, particularly coming out of COVID, where, these long haulers seem to have people are dealing with all kinds of stuff that seems to be at the height, a lot of anxiety out there, a lot of depression out there, a lot of people out there in rage and depression. I mean, it's a lot of, seem to me, great. I mean, what are you experiencing, and how do you think Jesus is wanting to respond to people's heightened issues these days?
Yeah, first of all, I just think it's important that we understand, and what you're trying to share is the theology of a storm, right? It's so important that we understand, we like to say Mother Nature, right? As if she is disconnected from God, right? But Mother Nature is under the authority of Father God.
It's all good. It's all good.
And it's so important that we understand that, and that generally when there is a storm, that God is up to something. For example, the one that Jonah was in, right?
Yeah.
God was up to something.
Yeah.
This particular storm you're mentioning in Mark 4, of course, you're giving the context from Mark 5, but in that storm, God is up to something. God is looking to show us something.
Absolutely.
God is looking usually to elevate us. Usually he's looking to elevate us, to give us a passage to another level. God is usually looking, get this now, to draw us closer to him. And so it's so important that we realize that in the midst of a storm, God is up to something, which means that one of the things we need to do is say, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." God, what are you up to? God, what are you trying to show me? And God, what are you trying to teach me? And again, the reason that this storm was captured in scriptures for all to see is so that we don't repeat the mistake of the original disciples, right?
Yes.
They panicked, even though Jesus was on the ship.
And that's significant. It's good to know you have access to Jesus, but if he sleep, maybe you should take a nap too. If he ain't tripping, I mean, maybe he knows something about this that you ought to be taking a clue off of. I mean, since you were talking about there's a message in every storm,
right.
There's another storm, remember, then he had gone into the mountain to rest. This was after the miracle we talked about in John 6. Before he had gone after he had fed the 5,000, he went to a mountainside to rest, and they went out on the sea, and they saw him walking, to them while they were in the storm. And Peter, again, was in a stressful moment, and he was, he saw Jesus, and in this one of his rare moments where he said, "Listen, I'd rather be out in the storm with him than in the boat with y'all." So the issue is not the safety of a boat, it's being in the presence of Jesus.
That's right.
So in this case, Jesus was in the boat, so that's where I'm going to be. But Jesus, in that case, he was in the storm, out in the water. I'm going to go out there. So Peter had a good clue. It's best to be wherever Jesus is.
Yes.
And he comes, he walks out, and, the interesting piece to that is Jesus is walking on top of what's bottoming them out. So if he's walking on top of a storm, then that ought to give you some comfort to know that if he can handle it, you can too. If he has a sense of authority with it,
yes,
then so can you, because as you just stated, he's not unfamiliar with Mother Nature. He's not unfamiliar with the storms of life. When the storms of life are raging, one song said, "Stand by me." In other words, he is the place that we get close to or closer to.
That's right.
And for some reason, we want to run farther away from Jesus. Storm comes, then we want to go and pop some pills. Well, you ain't running to Jesus. You're going further away. Storm comes, we want to go get high. We want to go get drunk. We want to go and pop off on some people and have road rage or get, all kinds of issues. Whatever your issues are, do things that bring you closer. Jesus is near to comfort and cheer just when you need him most. So in the text, and you were suggesting this issue of his control and authority. He wakes up in the midst of the storm, hears their concerns, and then speaks those famous words that James Cleveland made out of a song.
That's
you
right.
know, peace be still. But he says, he rises in it, and he says, peace be still, and the wind ceased, and there was a great calm.
Yes.
And he said to them, why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? That's verse 40 in chapter 4. And they feared exceedingly and said one to another, what manner of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? I mean, they had been with him this long, and they had not even a clue that he had this kind of presence and authority. Let me unpack that piece, because it is true that you must discern the storm you're in, and to know, as Reverend Carr was just saying, what kind it is. And I do believe that this was what I would call a devilish storm, or a demonically induced storm. And the reason why I believe that is because of how Jesus handles that. So when he handles this storm, the Bible says he stands up in the ship and he rebukes, is the word that is used. And as usually when we use that word rebuke, is what Jesus does to the demonic. It's what Jesus does to anybody who is demonically induced or possessed. When he rebukes again the wind, and it says then all of a sudden Mother Nature lays down, which means that the problem wasn't the wind, the problem wasn't the sea, the problem wasn't the atmosphere or the elements of Mother Nature. The problem was the devil that's in it. Because once he rebukes it, you don't have to rebuke something that's behaving.
That's right.
You don't have to rebuke somebody that's behaving. Whenever rebuking takes place, it's because something devilish or something demonic or something evil is occupying it. And maybe that's what's wrong with too many of our churches and our households and our cities and our government and other places. We need people with authority that will get up and rebuke the devil that's in it, not rebuke the person. Because we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but principalities and powers and evil in other places. The problem ain't, the person who you are after. The problem is the spirit that occupies it. And we must become spiritually discerning to know what is the spirit that's occupying, because the occupying spirit is what's causing the challenge. When a person is out of balance or out of order or dis-ease, as even the devil who gets into the wind and the waves, in this case, Jesus rebukes it. I wish more pastors would get up and rebuke contrary winds. I wish more parents would start. Listen, you're not going to get bad behavior out your kids, giving them, extra little candy canes and sugar and little Johnny, can you please start? No, some things need to be rebuked. And I ain't trying to say, rebuke sound like I'm telling you to do something to them, but I'm just saying at least there's some things ought to be done with prayer. Because prayer is part of your spiritual authority. Go in your arsenal and begin to deal with how you deal with speaking words of authority. And not be passive about some things. When Jesus was after this, I don't think he got up in that wind and his whisper and said, now y'all behave. Now y'all stop now, you're scaring my disciples. Now y'all be good. No, he stood with authority.
Yes.
Right? And that's how we have to begin to deal with some of the powers that be when our government's out of line. We have to stand with an authoritative voice and rebuke contrary winds. When you get people who want to fight, godly vision in the church, sometimes you see these folk on Sunday morning, they look so nice and holy and sanitized and sanitary, but them same folk get into a church meeting, amen, hat cocked down, come in there loaded for bear, talking all kind of stuff, except you need to rebuke them winds. And no, not in here. You in the same seat you was in when you were singing holy, holy, holy. So we're going to behave. We're going to do this God's way. We're not going to fall out with each other. Right? But we're going to have the ability to not let the devil get involved in a godly opportunity. Jesus does not mind identifying the demonic even in nature, because the demonic does not mind what it possesses. In this case, he is possessing nature to have a cosmic epileptic fit. And Jesus said, now y'all behave. That's how you know that Jesus is fully human and fully divine. That's how you know he is Jesus and Christ. He is human and curious. That's how you know that he has yet the issue of being Son of Man, but he's also Son of God. And he has the ability because nature recognizes him. You say, oh, wait a minute, that's the guy that said, let there be. Or that's the voice that I heard that said, let the waters above the firmament separate from the waters below the firmament. Let me recognize the voice that put the sun in the sky and the moon and as the stars are looking. Yes. They recognize the cosmic voice of a master, and at that point, the demonic ceased and the winds behaved.
Dr. Blaine, I'm reminded, what a great point. I'm reminded of presidential candidate John McClain when he rebuked the crowd who was trying to say, who was speaking ill of Obama.
I remember that.
Yeah, he rebuked them.
Yes.
And he cut it out. No.
And he did it with authority. He said, we may have differing ideas, but he's a good man. Because they were trying to talk about his nationality. They said he was some kind of foreigner. That's when 45, I almost called his name, was back doing the birther stuff. That's before he even got into the White House. But they were trying to come with these birther ideas and trying to demonize them. They usually attack your person. They don't deal with your ideas. They try to attack you, your person. And wisely, John McCain, Republican, being different than, again, a Democrat, he says, no, we're not going to attack him. He is a decent individual, right? He is a person. We just have a difference of opinion on these ideas, and we want to discuss them, and we want you to vote for what you believe is the best idea going forward. And I loved John McCain for that.
Yes, yeah, but when you talked about the need to rebuke, and obviously,
and he spoke to his own people.
He sure did, right? He they were his people.
Yeah, he wasn't rebuking Democrats.
And where would we be? Where would we be today if we had more of that courage in the church house, in the White House? We just in the family. We need folk to stand up and say, "Now cut it out."
That's right.
In fact, basically, what Jesus said to the storm is, "Look here, sit down." We didn't have enough of you.
That's right.
That's enough.
That's it. That's it. Listen, how many of us had mamas? I mean, my mother, amen, Marguerite Bland, her sister, I call her Auntie BB, I see her granddaughter on just now, just looked at us on her, hey, Connie, when she was kind of named after her. Listen, my Auntie BB and my mother both played the piano for the church, with the churches that they belonged to, with first ladies, consummate first lady playing the piano. So, we thought that was an opportunity for us to cut up in church because they wasn't close. So when they was focusing on the music or directing the choir, we'd be trying to pop candy in our mouth and stuff like that. But they always put us next to accountability partners called church mothers, and that's why I love them so much today, because they kept me out of jail. But every now and then they'd look up, and even if we got past the church mother, because Mother Slater at Morning Star, I could get past her because I knew what time she was going to shout, and I always timed, her shout. As soon as Reverend Mingo got to that certain part of the sermon where you turning up, then I knew she going to get up, spin around like a top, and take on down that aisle, and I ate every little piece of whatever I had in my little bag. But my mother had this look that if you looked up and caught on that, and that look said all the words that Jesus was using in this text, because it was a look of authority. It was a look of abuse. Like, if you don't want me to get up off this seat and come over there, or wait till I get you home. But that look of rebuke made the devil in you, amen, behave. Yeah, you sit up there like a but and I wish people had more honor and reverence and respect, for that authority, because you must honor something before you allow it to speak to you. You must honor someone before they have that ability to exercise that level of authority over you. That's why even as a pastor now, as long as I've been pastoring in ministry, nearly 40 years of doing this, I keep authority over me. I need somebody who can rebuke me.
Wow.
I need someone who I honor enough to speak the devils out of my life. Because when you get to the top of your own food chain, then you got a fool for an advisor. At some point, you must honor someone enough that you subject yourself to honest critique. And that's what excellence in ministry or excellence in life always yields itself to. And that is you putting yourself in a person's place or proximity that they can speak life into you or hell out of you. I think I just said something.
You got to say that again.
You want to position yourself so that you have somebody in your life that can either speak life into you when others are trying to diminish you, and they can say when you're negative. And sometimes that's why you have to make sure you get the right friends, or you marry the right partner, or you go to the right church, or you're part of the right, arena, because you get reinforced by your company. And you want people who tell you the truth, not just tell you what you like to hear. And so when you have that reinforcement, or even people that are mentors or life coaches or therapists or whatever the case may be, you want people who you reverence enough that you trust. You open up the tape room of your life and heart, and they can see into you, and they can at least encourage you in the areas where you need to be lifted up or torn down, or they can rebuke you in areas where you are too high and mighty or too possessed with even yourself. Can you imagine what would have happened to the last president, 45, if he trusted anybody to at least rebuke some of them demons, that's still occupying him? And that's one of the reasons why some of us stay possessed, is because we are refusing to properly have somebody name them for us. I don't want to get too ahead of the text, but in this process, this moment, Jesus shows the disciples what to do to demonic winds, to winds of adversity, by speaking with authority, is a lesson to many of us that we ought to get a little bass in our voice, when it comes to the challenges of our day, and be willing to do it with compassion. See, because that's the nature of the lesson. He didn't do that angry at the winds and tell them don't blow no more. He didn't get that to the sea and tell them you have no use anymore and go back to the place where you come. No, he has purpose for it, but he says you are outside your purpose when you're causing people discomfort, when you're causing this ship to deal with the challenges it is. At some point, you need to behave so other people can get rid of the issues that control them. That also says to me that evil is systemic. He does not deal with personal behavior of the disciples. He doesn't just deal with the fact of why are you scared. He doesn't just deal with the fact of why did you just wake me up out of this nap. He's not dealing with the fact that your personal activity is interrupting, what I'm trying to do. He does not blame them even for this storm. He goes to the system. In other words, if a person is caught stealing and they are guilty of taking food, out of a store, yes, that's a crime. Yes, that's a challenge. But you might find out that this is somebody who's hungry, who's trying to feed their little brother, little sister. Mama may be drug addicted, or nobody's at home, and he was trying to find a way to take care of even somebody else to deal with. So, yes, the behavior is bad, but what about a system that bursts the problems we have with children who have to live every day homeless, hungry, fending for themselves, etc.? We need to rebuke a system that bursts this level of homelessness. The level of homelessness is happening in Karen Bass when she took over L.A. It's just massive, the number of people who are living in that city on the streets in tents. I mean, in most of our major cities and others, while you have CEOs of companies who are going away with profits that they will never be able to spend in a lifetime. You have people who can't pay their water bills, light bills, rents are going up, inflation. People keep escalating and moving the prices up so they can keep getting profits is the problem. If they leave the prices alone and allow the profits to be able to be shared, we wouldn't have the inflationary issues we're dealing with. But some of the challenges we have is because folk say, well, listen, if it's going to cost me more, it's going to cost you more. So they're going to keep moving the scale. Why? Because we want to keep being, at this level of profit making. And when you see that the systems of our world that causes the economic, the political, the racial, the gender issues of our day, Jesus rebukes the system that produces the storms. Why do you talk to people, Brother Percy, downstream who's drinking polluted water and say, don't drink the bad water, and never curse the factories upstream that's polluting the water? You can stop and help save more people if you stop it at the factory than trying to get all these people to stop dying from drinking bad water. So Jesus speaks to the source, and he says, be still. Peace, that word that we get with, irene, is one source of the word peace. Shalom is another word of that. It's not the absence of noise or confusion. It's the presence of justice and presence of godly voice. So that is kind of where we are looking at Jesus's focal voice in this text. And the last thing I think, and Reverend Carr can help lead us and bridge us into this chapter 5, when he says these words, this is the one thing I just want to notice. Earlier in the text, I think I noticed where it said there were other little ships. But after the storm, you don't hear about those little ships no more. The only ship that basically makes it to the other side is the one that Jesus is on. So I just want to talk to people who are caught up in all these little ship meetings. I want to catch all you little pew pastors out there. That's what Pastor, one of my brothers in ministry, Pastor Kenneth Edward Copeland, calls them pew pastors. People who want to pastor their row, and nobody wants to hear what the pastor may be saying. What people who want to sit far enough away, where they can say they are close, but yet they are navigating the ship that they're on and commentating things based on how they see it. You do know every time that a church or a family or whatever cast vision, there's always somebody who's got something contrary to say. Well, what y'all doing that for? I wouldn't be doing all that for you. I ain't giving, I ain't helping. So you become a control agent trying to steer people away from where the ship is going. And most people, in order to do that, they got to have their own little ship meetings. So they have their own little Facebook, chat groups. They got their own little phone call. Back in the day before social media, they had to get on the party line on the phone, or they met in the parking lot, out there on the parking lot. And I'm not at Liberty Temple because our parking lot is we got security. But people have to handle godly vision by revision. But the one thing I want you to note is when there's no right way to do wrong. And most times, I think Mordecai Johnson says, evil is not capable of a perfect plan. There is no little ships that survive some storms. The only way they survive this one is the one that Jesus was on, is the one he spoke peace to. And they survived it. So again, be careful of riding with people that talk good stuff before the storm, but they can't help get you out of one. Because nobody on those other little ships had the power to speak like he spoke. I'd rather be in the storm with Jesus than drowning in the storm with somebody who claims to know what they're doing and where they're going. And again, I just want to look at that little incidental piece, because I think Mark put that little ship thing in there for a reason. And again, the evacuation of that is not there. But Mark 5:1 says, after the storm ceased and people were marveling at him, it says they came to the other side. So here's the question that leads us and bridges us to this issue of our second level of our topic today. Why did they go through all of this? What was Jesus' purpose for saying, let's go to the other side? Because he has intentionality in wanting to go. In Mark 4:35, he says, with intentionality, let's go over there. And he left multitudes to get there. Remember, he was teaching, right? He was healing. He was doing all kinds of stuff. He was tired. He had wanted rest. He left a mega church to go over to the other side. And when he gets to the other side, Most of us would think that if you left that number of people and left that number of profit-making possibilities or crowd-making name for yourself and went through all of this hellish storm on the sea, it must be for something better on the other side. But when he gets to the other side, the text says he gets to a country called the Gadarenes, and it's just one man that he encounters. That is the marvelous thing about Jesus and about this text that gets me. And again, I want to show you what kind of man Jesus is and what kind of compassion he shares as you want to encounter Jesus. Some of us think that following Jesus should mean if I leave what I'm doing, I ought to have more members or more money or more, building or more Christians. But sometimes you'll get where you're going and you get to where you are and you don't see as much, but you do see a need. Jesus encounters a man in the Gadarenes that he declared was worth leaving everything he left, going through everything he went through just to get to. Most people have heard preach this text, Reverend Carr, calls him the crazy man. Right? Mm-hmm. Mark 5 demoniac.
Right.
We make him the crazy. But let's unpack why Jesus leaves crowd for crazy.
Yes.
And then also, I want us to learn how we can change even our nomenclature so we don't call crazy anymore. Because some things are not really as crazy as we thought. They just are a form of challenge and health and malady that Jesus wants us to pay attention to and get to and heal, just like he was healing all those people who were blind, just like he was unstopping deaf ears, just like he was helping people who were paralytic. Now he wants to deal with people who have diseased mental challenges and a disturbed spirit. This man, he finds in the tombs, has all of those characteristics. I'm going to read it and then the Reverend Carr expound. He comes to the other side, verse 1, chapter 5. Mm-hmm. He comes out of the ship, and immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit.
Yes.
Who had his dwelling among the tombs. And watch this, no man could bind him. Nobody could stop him. He was a strong man. No, not with chains, because that he had been often bound with fetters and chains, that is, people had bound him before, and the chains had been plucked asunder by him. In other words, he easily broke out of him, so he's a strong man. And the fetters broken in pieces, neither could any tame him. And always night and day, he was in the mountains and the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones. I'll stop there before we go to verse 6. Help us to say, what do you see when you see Jesus' encounter of this particular demon-possessed man?
Well, Dr. Bland, it's so interesting because one of the things that is so crucial that we learn how to do is to see the big picture of what God is up to. And so he starts with the man with the unclean spirit. And then he transitions, as we'll see shortly, to the woman with the issue of blood. And then he ends with Jairus' daughter. And we experience things in moment. Christ had this big picture in mind the whole time. This 5th chapter is such a powerful chapter and such a unique chapter, and it has so many transformational observations. One, again, in life, where would we be if we, like Jesus, could see the big picture? That God is up to multiple things all at the same time. See, Jesus wasn't rushed. He had the big picture, and he kept the big picture in mind, and so many things. So, for example, Dr. Bland, one of my first observations, and boy, this is powerful. When you read the whole chapter, Jesus can heal and help all kinds of people. Mm-hmm. So he starts with the crazy man, and then he moves with the woman with the issue of blood, And then he ends up with the dead girl. You know.
What a spectrum. What a spectrum of issues. And the fact is, he cares about each one of them. Most of us would get past stuff that would be of challenge to our ministry. We would go to things that would make us look good. I told you, he was just with multitudes and crowds, and I would have stuck with the mega church.
Right. That's
why go deal with all of this stuff?
Uh-huh.
But he intentions to leave them to get to this. Maybe that's the problem with Christians. You know, we are scared to deal with the issues that really are hurting people, the places where people are dealing with the most challenge. And maybe that's the reason why some folks see no purpose or reason or issue with the church, because we are hiding in our churches from the real issues he has compassion for.
Yes.
We're using our churches as a not only a worship place, but as a hiding place from dealing with the real issues of our day and time. Maybe that was one of the reasons for COVID, because it ran us up out of these churches.
That's right.
And we had to live and deal with some of the crazy you've been running from. Man, if I can just get out this house on Sunday morning, but now you got to stay in the house with them, and y'all got to worship together. You know, now y'all got to, you know, if you just want to take your break from the kids, man, they get out of here and go to school. Now they got to study in the house with you. Now you got to see what they do in the classroom.
Yes.
Now you got to see what's really going on and why the teachers always having these challenges. Because again, all that stuff you say your child don't do, you knew they was doing that, and then some more. But now you got to deal with the fact that the reason why they're doing it is because of what you're not doing in your house. That maybe it's a lack of your parenting that leads with that lack of education. That you want to leave it all on a teacher, or all on the police officer, all on the pastor, all on the church, on a youth leader, on a youth. No. There is a village that must help us.
Yes.
And Jesus is concerned about those areas we're not doing well, not the ones that we are putting up as our plastic Christianity wants to promote. What about the things that we quote unquote call crazy? What about the issues that happen with women with their health problems? What about young girls who are dying in our streets before they die because they have been sex trafficked, or because they've been exploited, or because they are dealing with social media malady that causes them to see things and have low self-esteem and self-images about themselves that they were never supposed to see without the presence of an adult to help them interpret that you are more beautiful than you let yourself on to be. You don't need all these filters. You don't need to be out here dealing with all of this abusive language, people who want to hide behind a keyboard and say all manners of evil, and you leave that to children. I mean, anybody would be challenged with some of the things that some of our young people today are dealing with if they did not have the love and compassion of an adult who could speak life and beauty to them.
Wow.
And Jesus does not ignore these issues. And he starts with the man.
Went from one to the next to the next. And Dr. Bland is so interesting.
Men, women, youth. And each one in this text, all of them have a different nuance.
And isn't it interesting that he starts with Jairus and his daughter.
He ends with them.
Well, he starts and then transitions to the woman with the issue of blood. Remember, she interrupts him. He's on his way. But he takes the time to address the woman with the issue of blood, so much so that someone from the household comes and says, she's dead now. It's too late.
What I want to deal with, because what you exposing too is what another issue that the church does. We spend, issues with those persons that have helped, let me just say, first of all, keep our churches populated, going and growing, because it's been our female constituents that has kept much of our churches alive. Right? Mm-hmm. But you can't skip to fixing women if you don't address demon-possessed men. That's why I said we don't get to the women with the issue. or the kids with the problems, if you don't deal with that demon-possessed brother that basically starts the chapter and is his first encounter. Maybe the absence of men in our church is because, and note, this man is out up in the tombs. And when Jesus comes and exposes him, he actually shows he's not a weak person, because everything that tries to externally bind him, he breaks out of. But he's still considered crazy. Everything that tries to hold him back, to keep him from at least being chained, the King James Version says fettered, doesn't quite work. And it kind of reminds me of the plight of black men.
Wow.
It really reminds me of the plight of black men, because the truth is we've endured chattel slavery. Didn't work. We broke out. We've endured, the dysentery to see the Middle Passage. We've endured, the issue of Reconstruction and Jim Crow and all of that type of stuff. Things that other people succumb to. It seems that as a whole, we were able to survive through it, but yet and still we have not yet arrived, or we still not yet where we ought to be, because the problem is not what other people outside are doing to us, it's what we're doing to ourselves. That's a case of mental illness, if there ever was one. That what is happening that's part of our demise is external powers can't stop us, but we turn on ourselves. I mean, when you look at the new ploy by even, the Republican Party, when they could not seemingly use voter suppression ideas to get over, etc., they decide, for instance, in the case of this last election, Ralph Warnock, the new ploy is, let's go get another person that looks like him. See, because he can say and do some things that another white guy can't say without being considered racist. He can say and do something that we can't quite say without being considered to be oppressive, because they fight us when we come. But what happens when it's person on person? Well, the crazy thing about that, if you would, is that we would dare allow ourselves to be put back in an arena fighting like pit bulls, like we have been treated like in the past, and have this ability where we don't see value in each other. This ain't the first time. I remember when Obama was running for senator. They went all the way out of state to go find Alan Keyes, way over the East Coast, to come, move from Maryland to come run against him, because they were trying to stop him, because they saw presidential material in him. Some kind of way we get people to turn on each other on our own. Now, ain't nothing unique about what we call black on black crime. Most crimes are crimes against people or crime of people.
That's right.
We just don't call it white on white, or yellow on yellow, or brown on brown.
Because they're closest to you.
Right. The proximity is what causes most of the passion. We just heighten it when it comes to ourselves. Because again, as a powerful people, we have potential to do great things unless something is binding us. And the binding in this text, the Bible says, is not the external forces, it's the internal forces. It's what we are doing to ourselves. The man is cutting himself. The man is hurting, harming himself, but nobody else can do it. So it's not only true for a race, but it's also true for a individual, because mental illness is uniquely designed to turn you inward. One of the traits of mental illness is it does not cause you to want to turn towards community, but it turns you inward. And when you can turn inward, it makes you feel like the world is coming in or closing in, or everything is fatal and futile, because you can't see